Ooh. Oh, gee.
You feeling all right, Mr. Mackey?
Yeah, I'll be right back. Oh!
Oh, poop!
Oh, it's my Excuse me, kids, I need to run. Ow! Okay, can somebody give me some paper towels? Or maybe Oh, it's fine!
My mother, a very wise woman, gave me a single piece of advice when at the tender age of 17 I headed off to Cambridge to be grilled in a series of entrance interrogations by this man, who was indeed almost as unpleasant as this photograph of him suggests. Also this man, slightly less unpleasant, but equally strange to encounter, especially for a kid fresh off the boat with absolutely no idea about how to talk to or behave around the upper echelons of the English class system.
Oh, it's fine!
My mother's advice wasn't to swat up on my lit crit hot takes the night before my interviews or cram in a bit more F.R. Leavis, but to remember that at some point that very morning, perhaps just before our meeting, these titans of intellect and tradition would have shuffled into a bathroom, just like me, dropped their tweed trousers and evacuated a turd into a dutifully waiting porcelain bowl, bleached for this very purpose by their wives or college chars. All I had to do, as far as she was concerned, was to focus on their shit whilst they focused on mine, that sort of stream of eager-to-please word salad pouring out of my callow gob at the time, and perhaps some would even say, right now. You decide. John Casey or Jeremy Prince turd might be loose or knotted or pellet-like, but it would most likely, my mother and I agreed, smell atrocious, much worse than my own and hers after their feasting the night before on port and game pies and overcooked vegetables at Formal Hall. A terrible, terrible cliche, but something I was indeed able to witness and verify with my own eyes before the interview. Regardless of the volume, texture or hue of their excrement, whatever way the turd emerged, shall we say, from their hairy primate bottoms, I was to give at least 5% of my attention to Prynne and Casey's fecal matter, whilst my interlocutors continued to discuss whatever it was they wanted to know from me, the finer ambiguities of, Renaissance theology, or asking me what Alexander Pope really meant by the concept of wit. Equally, if that weren't enough, I was also to bear in mind that these ultra-civilized, pale British monkeys who saw no need to clean themselves after defecating were now most likely seated across from me in their grand high-back chairs with underpants or boxer shorts ghosted by the faint, clinging trace of their own unwashed filth. If you hail from a country where bidets are standard issue, then as far as Ma and I are concerned, you have already ascended to a higher rung on the evolutionary ladder than the rest of us wipe and go barbarians. What can I say? Her interview hack worked. The non-pedigreed peasant sitting before them, and you now, was given a very low entrance offer, ABC, which I just about managed to achieve in my A-levels, and the rest, as they say, well, as I say, is misery. Little did Ma know at the time that her suggestion had a very noble lineage. Across the ages, philosophers, poets, satirists and saints have all reached for the same trick: pull the exalted down to earth by pointing, often quite literally, at their arses. In ancient Greek, Diogenes the Cynic weaponized his own body against abstraction, defecating in public, masturbating in the marketplace, even shitting on statues. When asked why he behaved like an animal, he replied, "Because I am." Voltaire once wrote with evident glee that we are all full of shit, the only difference is that some of us know it. Rousseau, that proto-modern sensualist, in his Confessions, detailed his toilet habits with the same gravity that he gave to his soul. And Karl Marx, with his endless obsession with base material conditions, would not have balked at the excremental register, shall we say, of human life. Nor Freud, who of course made shit the child's first creative gift. For Freud, as I'm sure you're aware, the so-called anal stage was not just a matter of development, but a symbolic crucible where control, shame, pleasure and power were first negotiated, one turd at a time. On a literary note, seeing as that's what I was there for, Jonathan Swift, in his 1732 poem The Lady's Dressing Room, revels in a similar gesture. The poem follows Strephon, an infatuated lover who sneaks into his beloved Celia's private quarters, only to discover, to his horror and mortification, quote, "things which must not be expressed." He eventually, much perturbed, flees his lady's dressing room in mortified disgust, repeating, quote, in his amorous fits, "Oh, Celia, Celia, Celia shits." This infamous line is not a mockery of Celia, but of Strephon, who has deluded himself, as most men do, into believing that this Eden project, his angelic Celia, is something much more than what her dressing room reveals her to be, a, quote, gaudy tulip raised from dung, as the poem puts it, which is to say, a sweating, peeing, pooping primate, just like him or you or me. Julia Kristeva, in her book Powers of Horror, calls excrement the paradigm of objection, which is to say, the part of embodiment that most threatens our fictions of human dignity. Shit is not merely matter out of place, as Mary Douglas puts it in Purity and Danger. It is fundamentally destabilizing, threatening the boundary between inside and outside, self and world, mind and meat. But perhaps this is exactly what makes it useful. In a culture of curated images and disembodied intellect, to confront the excremental, aka pee and poop, is to touch what the ego cannot assimilate, its animality, its impermanence, its odours and its stains. I've been reading recently The Point of Existence by A.H. Almaas in an attempt to, sublimate my self-publicising Earnest games into something faintly resembling self-awareness. And in his chapter on the spectrum of narcissism, Almaas describes how narcissism forms when the soul loses contact with what he calls essential presence, a direct preconceptual sense of being. This rupture begins, he says, when the baby starts to experience herself as an object, reflected, evaluated, and seen, rather than as a simple being. The glue, he writes, that holds inner experience together gets lost when this sort of performativity and these borrowed identities come into play. And yet, there are thankfully portals back to this essential presence, acts so basic, so irreducibly animal that they resist any narrative that the mind tries to place on them. Shitting and pissing, if you pay full attention to these acts, can return us, I think, to essential presence, not to the idea of the act or the associations with it, but to what actually is going on when we are doing these somewhat satisfying, highly satisfying animal behaviors. Perhaps if we really attend each time we do these things to the sensations of elimination from the inside as phenomenological encounters with presence, we might not only reconnect with those first pissing, shitting selves, the unconscious, undivided selves of infancy, but also by yoking the act to this sort of letting go practice, re-enter a kind of unguarded immediacy. Not transcendence, but release. Not higher consciousness, but deeper contact. A tiny, repeatable rehearsal of unselfing carried out every time we go to the bathroom. So that's the Earnest game, to shit like a saint and piss like a baby Buddha. Not to transcend the body, but to drop more fully into it. Not to escape the ego, but to bypass it, slipping through the bars of its cage by attending to what it ignores, these unglamorous, undiscussed, quietly ecstatic moments of being, wherever the body can find that, right? And also where the body can let go. How to play the game? Very simple. When I pee or poop in the next few days, I will stop everything else. No scrolling, no mental rehearsals, just me and the body doing what it knows. The only thing we ask the mind to do is to attend gently, curiously to the act of peeing and pooping itself. If Almaas is right, and narcissism begins when we lose direct contact with our own experience, then maybe this is a site of return. To pee and poop with full attention is to trace presence back to its origin, the raw animal immediacy of those earliest wordless evacuations. I will also, on each toilet visit, whether inside or out, try to hold in mind one of the many sobering truths that I've learned from Rose George's The Big Necessity, a fantastic book, a riveting read, seriously, exploring the politics, infrastructure, and global inequalities of sanitation. This too, I think, is a kind of gratitude practice, remembering that of the billions alive today, 1 in 5 of us still cannot depend, as we do, without a second thought, on the safe, private and dignified removal of our own human excrement. To shit cleanly and safely is not just a bodily privilege, George argues, but a civilizational enchantment. One that, for the next few days at least, I'm going to try and not treat as merely ordinary. So let's play the Earnest game of peeing and pooping.
My body is a cage that keeps me from dancing with the one I love. My mind holds the key. My body is a cage that keeps me from dancing with the one I love. But my mind holds the key. I'm standing on a stage of fear and self-doubt. It's a hollow play, but they'll clap anyway. My body is a